episode of our Leaders Series Fireside Chat. It is an exciting one between Sopnendu Mohanty, the Chief FinTech Officer at the Monetary Authority of Singapore, and Jane Fraser, the incoming Chief Executive Officer at Citi. This discussion will round up the ongoing conversations on how the financial services sector will respond in 2021 as Jane prepares to transition into her new leadership role in February next year. A major task ahead for her will be leading Citi into the post-COVID environment filled with uncertainty. This session will provide valuable insight into how Jane and her team are preparing for what is yet to come. Now, over to Sopnendu and Jane for the closing of this 6th series episode.
Good afternoon, Jane. Good to see you. And your recent appointment has been a huge inspiration to women and girls around the world. I really liked what you said recently, that it's not that women can't have it all. They can't have it all at once. Please elaborate that. It's quite a cryptic response or a cryptic answer you gave. And everybody's interested to know more about this comment of yours.
Yes, it came in response to one of the questions about, can women have it all? Can you have a career? Can you have a family? And I do think there is some crazy pressure on women and on men to almost be superwoman or superman. And that's just not realistic. I think we've all appreciated that on COVID. And so the advice to everyone is, you can have it all, but don't expect to have it at exactly the same time. I worked part-time all of the years that I was a partner at McKinsey, so about 5-6 years when my children were very young. So I could try and get a bit more of that balance between being a young mother with young children and having a career. But at that point, I would say the social life was non-existent. One of the advice that I got from a mentor of mine fairly early on is, why be in such a hurry? Your career is going to be measured in decades, and you'll probably have many careers in your life. So make sure that you really enjoy each period of your life, make the most of it, and don't try and achieve everything at the same time and put so much pressure on yourself. Kind of chill. Relax, I know, and make the most of each phase. And right now, I have sons who are in their 20 and 21-year-olds. They don't want to hang out with me quite as much as they used to. So weekends now, I have a bit more time with my husband to do other things that the last 20 years I didn't. So it's that's part of the advice.
Jane, the question always has been that for you to take the top job in Citi with that kind of philosophy would have been really tough for you. I mean, it's not that easy. People don't see that way. So how did you get through this whole journey of getting to the top job in Citi? What was your success story? What really worked for you?
Yes, I think I was given really tremendous advice by Vikram Pandit many years ago, where when I was working with him, another great fan of Singapore. And Vikram had said to me, what's your career path? What's your development plan? And I quickly ran away, wrote it down on a piece of paper and handed it to him. And he basically tore it up and said, you're thinking about this all wrong. And I was talking about how would I get to more senior roles. And he said, you've got to think about how do you collect and gather the experiences that will make you successful in the role, not the experiences that will get you to the role. And that was a game-changing piece of advice for me, because then I started doing completely different jobs and ones that weren't necessarily logical to most people's thinking. I moved from the private bank to running our mortgage business because in the mortgage business, I was going to get experience in different sorts of risks. I get experience working with operations and technology and the like. And so that philosophy very much guided me to think about what are things that would equip me better for a more senior role further down the path. All at the same time as another comment I remember a client made when I came back from maternity leave and I was back working again. And I was no longer this automaton, machine-like analyst who was trying to crunch all the numbers and get everything right. And I was more empathetic. And the client said, we like you a lot better. Now that you're no longer producing 100%, you're more focused on 80/20. You're a more empathetic person. We can relate to you better. And that reminded me, you have to be a whole human being.
Oh, Vikram will be very pleased to hear this, and I will let Vikram know that you referred him as your inspiration in that game changer shift you had. Well, I hope that you'll continue to ensure this progress continues in Citi, and more women gets opportunity as they come through the hierarchy. Let me shift to another quote of yours. It's very interesting quote you made, and you said, if people have a whole life, it makes them far better leaders and far better professionals. And you have to have the courage to say, this is my path. And the organizations have to support it. The question for you, how do you intend to make it happen for your employees in Citi?
Yeah, no, very much so. I think, during COVID has been part of those ones where, and Mike, our current CEO, was very, very clear we have to put our people first, because we've been in the midst of a health crisis. And if we didn't put our people's health and safety first, and understand what was going on in their lives, honestly, I think we would have done a very poor job managing the bank through the crisis, and be able to then make sure that we were able to support our clients if we didn't support our people first. And I think recognizing childcare has been very, very challenging for so many. The homeschooling has not been fun for many parents. There are demands of maybe elderly parents. There are one's own health to take care of. And if you aren't, as an employer, thinking about that and making sure you're providing the flexibility, and being, one size doesn't fit all, and recognizing that, and treating people the way that they need to have their healthcare benefits, their employee benefits, flexibility, that they can manage their lives through this. Then, I know certainly our employees have rewarded us incredibly, because they've then, secure in that and knowing that they were going to be okay in the firm, then meant they would focus on our clients, and look after them too. So I think it's really recognizing humanity is important, whether you're a bank, whether you're a fintech, whether you're a large organization, whatever it is. And I think this is will be one of the silver lining out of the gray cloud or very dark cloud of COVID. Will be more of a stronger empathy in how we approach our stakeholders.
Well, look, Jen, you talked about COVID-19, and as an interesting segue to my next question, because if you look at the market cap, is going in the wrong direction, and you're going to take a job right through the middle of a storm, and with the revenues in a big strain, how do you expect your bank to recover 2021? I know you're a global bank. I'm sure there's a certain strategic advantage you have. Share with us how you're going to take Citi through this difficult time.
Look, I think we, like many banks, we came into the crisis with tremendous capital strength, with a huge amount of liquidity, and very strong balance sheets. And that, together with the actions that the Federal Reserve in the States and many of the central banks around the world took, really enabled us as banks in this crisis to be part of the solution, not part of the problem. And so, that ability to really put all the attention of the organization on how do we help the corporations that were really challenged, how do we help individuals and the small businesses who were really hammered, both from a health point of view and then economically. That has been very critical. The relief programs, I know as a global bank, we greatly benefited from our Asian franchise around the world. And I'm sure we'll talk about that in the many different ways that we've benefited further on in the conversation. But in this one, seeing what was happening in Asia, we were able to be the first bank in America to roll out consumer relief programs for small businesses, and very targeted in the areas that we could see that it was the pain was happening in China, Hong Kong, Singapore, and other geographies that we're in, and therefore be very tailored and fast. So as we look at how the role that I think banks are going to play as we come out and move to recovery, as the vaccines come out, is very important. And that's going to be one of, helping those companies who will be the drivers of recovery, succeed, making sure they have the credit, making sure they have the strategies to do so. There are also those companies and those individuals who are going to need a lot of help coming out of this. I do fear a K-shaped recovery, that there'll be some who will come out very strong, there'll be others who will be, in need of a lot of restructuring help. And so obviously the banks will play an important role there. And then there's also the roles in terms of what do we do from our corporate responsibility agenda and with our stakeholders. And I look at things like we are working, advising Gavi, who is, a institution, global institution that currently vaccinates half of the world's children. We're going to be helping advise them as their financial advisor as they look to distribute 2 billion vaccines equitably, procure them, and then distribute those equitably to those parts of the population around the world who may not have as ready access as others. So I think there's a number of different important roles, and we will all need to be banks with a brain, but also banks with a soul as we come out of this crisis and we help our clients and our communities.
Thank you. I mean, that's a fascinating way to frame where you are, how you want to come out of the crisis. Bank with a soul. I think that's a Twitter line. I hope it comes out as we get to this interview. Shifting the discussion to my core area, which is technology. Now, if anybody says that we are getting digital, it is not a big deal anymore, right? So the competition in this space has just gone through the roof.
Mm-hmm.
What are the 2 or 3 things Citi will stand different, or make Citi look different from other digital banks as you think about your next 2 to 3 years of digital strategy? I didn't talk about 10-year strategy because technology is moving at a very fast speed. 2 to 3 years is as best we can look at. What are your top 2, 3 strategies?
Yeah, let's start with our real strength. Citi's great strength is our ability to help investors, institutions, individuals grow globally and succeed in multiple markets, and also to access global markets. So, that's really the heart of where we are exceptional. So as we're looking at that world, that means a lot of our technology has to operate at the speed of technology, which is very fast. We have to be keeping up in terms of our culture, as well as our operating model, as well as our client propositions, with a very different architecture. So I would argue that the architecture of finance that operated for the past 50 years or more, right now with COVID, that's really got accelerated into a fundamentally different architecture in many parts of the business. So what we're looking at is how do we shift from legacy architecture to an architecture that is much more born digital. We were one of the first banks to go very branch-light, for example, and drive that move to more of a digital and a mobile proposition. This now moves into the world of ecosystems. And I think from Citi's perspective, we're very much a partner of choice for many of the different eco players, particularly in a world of embedded finance. So that notion of what we're looking at is how do we gain scale? How do we make sure that we retain our relevance as a bank, but under this new architecture, not just playing it under the old rules and the old game. And I think that mindset, because we're such a diverse organization, right? It is a United Nations when you work at Citi around the world, as you remember from your days there.
Yes.
And I think that mindset is very valuable in this environment because you kind of have to throw out some of the old rules. You have to be prepared to cannibalize parts of your businesses. I think it'll hit the consumer side faster than it's affecting the wholesale businesses. But those two are converging, and you'll see us bringing more and more of our wholesale and our retail capabilities together, and play the game that way. So our globality will help us, but it's certainly a case of playing a different game is going to be important.
It's so true. I mean, look, Jane, there's a question which perhaps related to the first question, given I also represent the fintech world, and this is a question from the fintech community, and they're going to listen to this question very carefully because they believe Citi can do a lot in this space. You know, you have a huge tech budget, perhaps one of the top tech spender globally, and there is this perception that a lot of the spend goes to large vendors, and the tiny fintechs don't get an opportunity to work with Citi. So the question is, I'm sure Citi is looking at working with fintech vendors who are small in size but very unique in many sense. How are you going to create a space for them? How can they work with you? That's the big question.
Yes, look, I think it's a great question, and absolutely an important way of working together. And I think it will come in many different dimensions. The first piece is in many parts of the world, the last mile is becoming even more relevant. And what I've seen, I ran our Latin American franchise for a while, and we started really building out the network of different fintechs who work with in each individual geography, because the types of capabilities to enhance service propositions, to make the delivery more seamless, to bring new innovations, to make it much easier for clients to interact with the big global Citi platform. That last mile is absolutely vital, and that last mile is local, and it's very local. And so I think we've had the great pleasure of working with a huge number of local fintechs at a fairly early stage in their life, some of whom have grown into much larger giants, and others who've remained smaller in their local market. And we use our Citi Ventures arm, which is based in San Francisco, to make sure that we also invest in many of the smaller fintechs. We've done this for well over a decade now, with a notion of how do we also help, because this is a collaboration model. I think as at many banks we used to pretend we were a technology company, and as well as being a bank, but now you don't build it yourself, and the innovation is coming from lots of smaller entrepreneurs, as much as it is from the larger shops, and something we welcome. And actually, more than that, it's fun, right? These are the players that make this. This is where the fun sits in financial services.
I'll tell you, Jane, that in Asia we have almost 80 to 70% of fintechs who are in the business of working with the bank. So it's a great news for them. They'll come to Citi doors very quickly to talk about partnership. I hope.
We have a great facility out in Changi that we enjoy listening and learning.
We'll send them to Changi very soon. And the last question on technology, which is a very recent partnership with Googleplex. Well, the question is not about the partnership, is about you chose not to build, but you want to partner. That's one shift, which is a great shift. And the other question is this your own way of catching up with the newer banks faster?
It's a great question. So again, if I look to Asia, we've been partner with Ant in China and WeBank. We've been a partner with Grab, Anthony Tan and all his team in Singapore and around the region. KTM and Vijay, who I know is joining you as well at this great conference. And so we're very used to joining into an ecosystem and looking at embedded finance. I think when we look at Google, and I met with them, Google Pay and the team in India, just at the beginning of the year before everything changed. And we could really see how the world is changing, and Asia is leading the rest of the world in terms of the unbundling and this new architecture of finance we're talking about. And we saw this, first of all, payments got unbundled and disconnected. We're seeing it with lending increasingly. We're going to see it with deposits, particularly as everything moves so much more of an embedded finance model into where it is that consumers and companies are actually spending, where are they saving, how are they living their lives. So we decided we better go on the attack and on the offensive on this, rather than get too hooked for too long to the old way of doing things. I think importantly with Google, it is our own checking account. So this is something that is on banking rails. And we had long discussions on data. We had long discussions about client relationships and making sure that the responsibilities as a bank were being upheld, and Google's being a fantastic partner in this. It's an important, we think it's going to be a very important development. We're working very closely with MasterCard, Google, really innovating a lot more about what do we think the future of banking is going to be, and how do we really embed this in, but still keeping those disciplines that I think, as MAS knows only too well, it's very important that we have the protections for the customer in there. And therefore, this being a proposition on a Citi checking account, although in a digital format being important, it will also be, I think, a driver of a lot of financial inclusion and other opportunities going forward as well.
Good, very exciting plans for Citi. In Asia, we are close to 20 plus new licenses being issued. Huge competition, good, more competition, better for consumer. I will shift to a couple of questions right in Asia for you. You recently announced you're globally, I think, the largest wealth hub in Singapore.
Yes.
Question for you, what is your wealth strategy for 2021 or beyond? And we are quite excited and we're thankful to you to do this in Singapore.
Well, that wasn't a particularly hard decision, I have to say. I used to run the private bank in Citi globally, and one of my first trips ever was to actually the very first trip I made as head was to Singapore.
Yes, I met you then.
Exactly. And I think I've got a huge respect. It's very important for a wealth center to be one that is truly trusted. And trusted by all the stakeholders. That it's one that a client feels security in placing the wealth, that there is the opportunities for a diverse and strong capital market where they have confidence in, and also the talent, but the guardrails as well around it. And Singapore provides that. We do at Citi see one of the big unstoppable forces over the next decade is going to be the wealth creation in Asia. And as we look at it from Citi's perspective, we have commercial banks in many countries, which is a lot of the source of wealth, as well as the larger institutions that we cover in our institutional franchise. We are an aspirational brand for many in the wealth management, and with Citi Gold as sort of the starter as you go up the escalator. And so, one of the things when I was being involved in the consumer bank the last couple of years, the head of the institutional business and I came together and said, this is crazy. We've got to come together as one Citi and put a single wealth platform together, put this on a new tech stack, bring in partners, and then make sure that we're providing really the best of all of Citi to our clients. And the place that we're starting that with is Asia. And it will be, an important part of our thrust and focus on the wealth market. Certainly not our only one in Asia and in Singapore, but it will be an important growth thrust for us in the future.
Thanks. And Jen, I'm going to push a little on the same question. Why Asia and Singapore still remains a very important market for Citi?
Oh, well, it's as we said, we're a very global bank. And Singapore is a very, very important hub. We've been in Singapore for well over a century. It's a very important center for us for our clients. So we tend to be driven by our clients. Where our clients are growing, where they're seeing activity, is where we will be growing as well. Particularly around our cash management, our trade flow, our foreign exchange, these different businesses that are really the working capital for corporations and institutions. So Singapore is a critical hub from that perspective, obviously. It's also a hub of innovation. I think Singapore's ability to continuously reinvent itself is one of the great legacies, of the country for the world. It's a great role model for how to keep reinventing. And in a world where we all have to keep reinventing ourselves at high speed, Singapore is a place you have to be. And then I'd say finally, it's talent as well. The talent pool in Singapore, it attracts a diverse pool, well-educated, a wonderful middle class who are hungry, who want to succeed. And so we have wonderful Singaporean talent globally, we love our teams from Singapore, but we also love bringing them around the world and bringing that same mindset. So it will be, it will remain a very, very important hub for all of those reasons.
Good. You mentioned talent. Talent is a big part of our discussion nowadays. And I think talent is becoming a more and more a scarce resource. And the global hunt for good talent is still on. Look, Jen, this has been a fascinating interview. The last question, and this is I think it's a tough question. I tried to put that way. Citi's brand is known as a bank for who can bank, people who have money. That's what we believe. Will Citi be a bank for everybody? Because that's the brand image you have outside US perhaps or Mexico, because people think I can only bank a Citi if I have money. So are you going to change it?
I think it's a great question. I think that's particularly true in Asia versus other geographies around the world. But I think part of this comes to the ESG agenda. That's a very important one for all of us these days. Our responsibility is to help the communities in which we operate in, and we don't have to do that solely by who we bank. We can do that in terms of who are the companies that we support. In the States, for example, where the Black communities have really been suffering, we've been working with a lot of the minority-owned banks to help provide them both capital, but also technology and know-how and technical expertise so that they can better support the communities of color that they operate in. I look around the world, we've provided microfinance to 3 million women. Like, that's a staggering number. We've been able to do that partly because we operate in 98 countries. In many of those countries, we're really only an institutional bank, but through our microfinance initiatives, through the different pieces that we do on the ground as a local player, we're able to have a huge impact in what we do. Another example with the Gavi vaccine we talked about earlier. In Mexico, we brought from Asia the QR code payment system, persuaded the Central Bank of Mexico, which is not hard to persuade, to say this has to get put in Mexico, helped bring the idea around, got the other banks involved. And we now have a free QR code based payment system that is helping drive financial inclusion. It's free for any payment under $400. That's driving financial inclusion. And we work with partners like PepsiCo. We've worked with them to get to all the mom and pop stores around the countries to make sure that we're able to get that capability to drive inclusion, also to help on security and inequality in those markets. So there is a huge amount you can do that may not be your primary product proposition to the core customer in a country, but there's a huge amount that we do to enable progress, because that's the bank's mission, is how do we enable progress and growth around the world? And that's where that sort of ESG mandate, not just corporate responsibility from a plaque on the wall and a check, but actually getting the bank and using everything that we can do to help really drive progress in reality on the ground. And
good, I think
Jen,
no, Jen, good is I think the bank should talk about it more and change this brand perception of being a bank for everybody, at least the examples you took. Look, it has been a fabulous, fantastic 40 minutes with you. I'm so happy to see you in this new job. And we wish you very, very big success, and Citi is in a great hand. And hopefully everything will go great as you plan. You are an inspiration to so many women and girls around the world. We hope to see you again face to face, hopefully in New York very soon as things get normal. Have a great day and hope to see you soon.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Sopnendu and Jane. What a great discussion. Jane, of course, going to become the first female CEO of Citi in February of 2021. And with the end of this session, we have now rounded up opinions from global banks across all regions on how the financial services sector is prepared to embrace 2021 and its challenges. We certainly hope that these key takeaways will give you a better understanding of how the industry is moving on the road to recovery. And we'd like to hear from you about not only this discussion between Sopnendu and Jane, but all of our discussions. Reach out to us on the SFF website. We have our Speakers Lounge chat. You can reach out there, or also on Twitter, hashtag #SGFintechFest. Hashtag #SGFintechFest. Reach out to us. Let us know what you're thinking.